very back at the end to give out some information about the organization. But really, I have found it to be very helpful, and so I think it's important. My kind of thought about this evening is that we would go through, Rabbi Blumenthal would start going through some ideas about Ribbis, and so you get an idea what issues, where to spot these issues, and then come some kind of solutions and stuff. We certainly won't be able to cover all of those solutions and issues. Sometimes when I talk to people who are secular, they think about Heter Iska, so there's a piece of paper you just sign, and then it's off to the races, whatever you want to do. So I think that's a misnomer. And the other misnomer is that sometimes that you can think logically, exactly or intuitively what's going on with Ribbis issues. We just went through Shabbos in Yantif. If somebody gives you a salad, and the salad has lots of black olives in it, everybody knows, halachically, not intuitively, but you can't just take the black olives out and throw them out, or you're over the Isser of Borer. On the other hand, if it's Yantif, you can, of course, take out the olives. So there's not something intuitive about taking it out or not. It's really what the halacha requires. Similarly, so if you have an LLC, and the LLC borrows $1 million. At the end of the year, there's 3 people. There's Moshe, there's Aaron, there's Miriam. And everybody gets $100,000. Moshe gets $100,000, Miriam, and so does Aaron. They all get $100,000. But one person's going to get a W-2. That's obviously the employee. Somebody else is going to get the K-1, and that's going to be the member of the LLC. And somebody else is going to get 1099. So it's how you structure the transaction. And so with Ribbis and with Heter Iska, it's having to take our mind and try to get it into a more halachic point of view that it may not be intuitively a Ribbis issue, because there are a lot of non-monetary Ribbis issues, but it has to be how to structure it. When you structure it a certain way, that's going to work out halachically. And I think that we as lawyers, at least in my office, we get plenty of phone calls about clients say, is there Heter Iska problem? What's Ribbis problem? What should we do? And sometimes they're not so obvious. So hopefully tonight we'll shed some more light on what those non-monetary Ribbis issues are going to be, how to resolve them using Heter Iska. I just want to also thank Riverside. Very helpful. And as soon as I called him shortly, I think maybe 4 or 5 months ago, he's here. I called him up. And he didn't call me back the next day because I think he was making a forward for his daughter. But he called me back the next day after that and said, yes, we're very interested in helping to do something. So I really want to thank them. They're very helpful. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to start with the issues. What we'll do is we'll go through a little bit of a segment, we'll stop and answer the questions, we'll try to get more general questions, and then we'll go through another segment, we'll kind of do clarification questions. That's how we want to try to do it.
I want to thank as well the sponsors for this evening, tremendous Riverside, Shor, Yoshuv, Dovid, Grossman, and the Beis Havaad, and the Novak, a beautiful event they put together. I thank everyone for coming out tonight, taking time out of their busy schedules, to come together and commit ourselves to this important matter. This Parshas Yoach. Rashi explains to us on the Chazal that even though the Dor HaMabel was notorious for reaching the depths of depravity, nevertheless, the Gzar Din of destruction was sealed because of the sin of Gezel, theft. Once their money, their economy, became tainted, at that point, society became impaired. And I think that the Midah Tova is Meruba, that the power of good is even stronger. That there's a cost of dedicating ourselves to keeping our business dealings.
Technical difficulty, we'll try a different microphone.
Keep our business dealings in line with halacha. That might be the best thing we can do to elevate our society to become the Mamlachas Kamanim, the Kadosh, the holy nation that we're meant to be. And it says in the syllabus that the goal for this evening is to foster an awareness of monetary and non-monetary interest issues in everyday transactions. Obviously, the goal in a 2-hour lecture is not for anyone to become a posek. Certainly, no one will go to a 2-hour medical conference and try to take out their own appendix. reports. When we say something's an issue, that doesn't mean it's usher, it doesn't mean you have to quit your job, it doesn't mean we're saying you have to back out of the deal, you just negotiated. It just means that you have to Shaila. There are many issues out there, and there are many Heterim for those issues. But the issues are general, and the Heterim tend to be personal. So we're going to focus on the general issues, and we're going to leave it to everyone to ask Shailas to get the personal Heterim. Like Mr. Novak pointed out, those Shailas, obviously I need to be directed carefully. There are Dayanim hotlines that are dedicated and eager to help people. Someone from one of them right here is eager to help. He's dedicated. He's available. Please let's keep them very busy. Also, before we begin, the Yeshiva is discussing starting a Zabur, a class in Ribbis, so anyone who's interested should either contact me or the Yeshiva. We'll start with sections 2 and 3 in the syllabus, discussing the two main categories of Ribbis, Ribbis Deraisa and Ribbis Deraisa. Ribbis Deraisa requires 4 conditions. It needs to be a loan, meaning it can't be a debt that came about through other monetary transactions. There needs to be a guaranteed return of principal, a guaranteed return of interest, and those guarantees need to take place at the time of the loan. Some Rishonim say that the guarantee can also take place at the loan's extension. The 4 conditions for Ribbis Deraisa. Ribbis Deraisa is usually pretty easy to spot, although we'll come back to it. It's not always quite so simple. Ribbis Deraisa is much more broad. It's widespread. It comes in many, many shapes and sizes, and it's often difficult to spot. I have a friend, Yori Shemayim, someone who wants to do the right thing. He learns a lot of Torah. And a couple of years ago, he had a son who was 2 years old at the time, and he registered his son in a playgroup at the beginning of the summer. Shortly after he registered his son, he got an email from the playgroup, along with, I think, all the other parents. And the email said something like this. It said that the playgroup is going to be short on funds for the summer, cash flow issues, and anyone who wants to prepay next year's tuition will receive a $500 discount. And my friend thought about it. He wasn't sure. It's a lot of money to lay out, and if this playgroup is having some fiscal issues, they might not be such a big credit risk. He spoke it over with his wife, with his parents, with his in-laws. Took a few days of deliberation, and at the end of the day, they decided that they were going to go ahead, they were going to take the discounts. They sent in a check. There was one question they never asked. They never asked, is I want her to do that? Is it Ribbis? Why didn't they ask that? It's not a loan. It's not a loan. I'm just paying for a playgroup. And besides, camps do it all the time, don't they? Early bird discounts. What's the big deal? You mentioned it to me. It's not bullshit. There are maybe certain reasons to be lenient, but very difficult. I told him that I was replace it. In the end of the day, he ended up paying the extra $500. Why is this Ribbis? So the Gemara gives us a rule. Klal Ribbis, a rule of Ribbis, the Gemara says. Whenever the Gemara tells us it's giving us a rule, it's worthwhile to pay attention and to keep it in our minds. What's this rule? Klal Ribbis. Kol agar natar li'asr. Any agar natar is asr. What's agar natar? That's Arabic. In Hebrew, it means schar u'tara, which in English basically translated means paying for delay. It's always nice when I go around this. Paying for delay. What's paying for delay? That means that if somebody owes you anything, any money, any goods, any services, any real estate, any payable you have, any receivable you have on the books, and you get any kind of benefit in exchange for delaying receipt of what you're owed, So that's potentially a Ribbis issue. And if you owe anything, and you might get something out of it, that's a problem. Which really means whenever you enter into any transaction, you always have to ask yourself two questions. First of all, is there a delay in me getting what's coming to me? And if there is a delay, am I getting any kind of benefit in exchange for that delay? And the answer to both of those questions is yes, then it might not be Ribbis, but it might be Ribbis. And you need to ask yourself. So back to my friend's play group. At the beginning of the summer, tuition for the year is not yet due. He was pre-paying tuition. He was paying a full year's of tuition, and he was delaying receipt of those services which he was paying for. Because of that delay, he was being given a $500 discount. That's paying for delay. That's hard tunnel. That's Ribbis. On the syllabus, you put down some other examples of Ribbis Rabbanan. Gifts before a loan. You know someone who has a personal demand for lending out his own money, and along with the loan application, you send in a nice bottle of whiskey. So you're giving them a gift in exchange for a loan. That's a problem. Gifts after the loan, when you pay back the money, you send in a thank you card along with that bottle of whiskey. That's a problem. The thank you card itself might be a problem. There's something called Ribbis Heter to thank someone effusively more than is standard, that's a problem. Thank you is okay, Shor, but more than that, it's problematic. People ask, how do I say thank you for a loan? It's a question. People ask, it's an issue. Doing favors potentially, if you lend somebody money and he lets you stay in his apartment there in Israel, then it comes to Shiloh. Two-tiered pricing. If someone has two price lists, one for cash customers, one for credit customers, that's a problem. You're telling them that you can pay one price now, you can pay a different price later. You can pay more to delay your payment. It's paying for delaying. Two-tier pricing is a problem. Trading work, a lot of issues involved in that. If I tell you I'll do a day's work for you today, and you'll do a day's work for me in 3 months, there are a lot of issues involved in that, unless it's the exact same thing. Now, we had mentioned camps, early birds. Those are a little bit different. Because there, normally, the camps do not require the full tuition ahead of time. Normally, they require a small down payment. And the discount they give you on a small down payment is terrible Ribbis on their part. If they're looking to get a loan, it's about the worst way you can possibly get it. And that's not what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is just lock in the students. So as long as it's a small down payment, the place can generally say that that's okay. Once it becomes the full tuition prepaid, then it becomes a problem. And now let's get back to a moment to Ribbis Heter Iska. Those are a few examples of many of the issues with Ribbis Rabbanan. We'll touch on a few more soon. Let's get back to those 4 conditions for Ribbis Heter Iska. Let's discuss them with a little bit more detail. First of all, Ribbis Heter Iska has to be a loan. Now, just for clarification purposes, in English, the word loan has a number of connotations. I lend you $1,000, I lend you a bottle of milk, and I lend you my car. But really, those are very different arrangements. When I lend you $1,000, I don't expect to get the same bills back, or even the same denominations necessarily. And when I lend you a bottle of milk, I certainly don't want the same bottle of milk back 3 weeks later. But when I lend you my car, I do not want to get back a different car with a similar make and model. I'm going to take care of my car, treat it well, and return it to me. And in Hebrew, we have different words for those things. In Hebrew, when I lend you something with the intent that you're going to use it up and give it back a different one, that's called a halva. When I lend you something with the intent that you're going to take care of it and return it to me, that's a she'ila, borrowing the object. And if I charge you for it, then it becomes schilus, rented an object. And it's important to note the distinction that Lulav, I cannot charge for. Spheres I can charge for. Now, there's a not too common example, but it's worthwhile bringing up. If someone rents out objects that have no wear and tear, like jewelry, then there are potential Ribbis issues in that. Or if someone's paying for wear and tear, that can potentially create problems. But basically, the idea is, if it's my object, you're using it, you're wearing it down, and you're paying me for it, that's fine. If I give you something like money, which becomes yours, and it's just an intangible debt, that you can't pay for. That's a loan. Also, it's important to point out that loans sometimes become created without people realizing it in unexpected places. And Yeshua, friends of mine have been Torah, he went into contract to buy a home, and the seller, he gave some earnest money to the seller's attorney, and the seller, at a certain point, realized that he needed capital. So the seller asked to release the earnest money to use towards his down payment on his new home. The buyer said, nothing doing. Why should I accept that risk? The seller said, I'll tell you what. We agreed on a price. I'll lower the price by $6,000, and you release the earnest money to me. That is a big problem. That's a loan. When the lawyer is holding the seller's money, the buyer's money, that's a big problem. He's holding it on behalf of the buyer. Once you release that money to the seller, no sale has taken place yet. That's not a purchase. You're lending money, which is going to be used later for purchase. At that point, that's a loan. That's a problem. We have to train ourselves to look for loans. It's hard to find them sometimes. Now, also a loan. You need a loan for Ribbis Heter Iska. When you have a business deal that does not involve a loan, that becomes Ribbis Heter, which means through buying and selling. Business deals. That's the next point of the syllabus. That includes prepayment discounts, like my friend's play group, paying early for discounts to go there. And also 210 net 30. Everyone here is familiar with 210 net 30. It's I'll explain it. Sure. 210 net 30 is where you buy some merchandise from a supplier, he sends you an invoice, the invoice has a price on it. The price is the amount that's due in 30 days. You have 30 days to pay that invoice. That's net 30. Or you have an option to pay that invoice in 10 days or less. And then you get a 2% discount. That's 210. 210 net 30. There are other variations of it. It's very common practice. And it's a big shiloh. It's a big shiloh because the supplier is telling you, you can pay me now $98, which means the current price for paying now, which is really when you're supposed to pay when you buy things, right now, is $98. Or I can extend your 30 days credit, and you can pay $100. Now, there are folks who discuss possible affair for this. So if you're involved in HVAC that your ISKA could deal with the problem, which we'll discuss later, you get specialized ISKA. But it's a problem, it's a shiloh, it's an issue, it needs to be dealt with. Now, guaranteeing principal and interest. I got an email last week from a website that I bought from. I think it's a Jewish company, and they were looking for their customers to invest in their business. They were looking for investors. And they were promising, the email said, 15% payable monthly. Now, I didn't see the prospectus if they have one, so I don't know the exact details. But if they're guaranteeing their money, and they're guaranteeing a 15% return, so you might call that an investment, but that's a loan with interest. That's Ribbis Heter Iska, and it needs risk. Even though they're only guaranteeing your capital, but your cost of payments or your take the profits, that's still us. That, by the way, is what's known as Tzon Barzel, which the Gemara discusses. Tzon Barzel literally means iron sheep. That's not where steel wool comes from. Tzon Barzel is a business arrangement, and it's actually a very important business arrangement to understand because it brings out really fundamental concepts in Hilchos Ribbis. The deal is that I give you $10,000 to buy sheep, or I give you $10,000 worth of sheep, and you agree that no matter what, I'm getting back my $10,000. The pack of wolves destroys this flock of sheep. If the sheep market plummets, regardless, you're paying me back my $10,000. That's why it's called iron sheep, because iron sheep don't die, they don't get lost, they stay where they are. Nothing happens to them. And nothing's going to happen to my $10,000. But on the other hand, we hope that these sheep will produce wool, will produce milk, will produce more sheep, will generate a profit. And that profit we're going to split. That's the arrangement which is known as Ton Barzel, and that is Ribbis Heter Iska. It's Ribbis Heter Iska because the profit's not guaranteed, but it's Ribbis. It's Ribbis. Now, if you don't guarantee my profit, if you share the losses equally, then basically it's mutter. There are small details we'll get to later, hopefully, but basically that's mutter. But what's the difference? I give you $10,000 to buy sheep. We share the profits and the losses together. We share the profits, but not the losses. That becomes us. And the fundamental here is that there's oftentimes a fine line between an investment and a loan. An investment, the main difference between investments and a loan, the deciding factor basically is risk exposure, capital risk. And my capital is at risk, that's a loan. If you have to pay me even if something happens to our investments, that means I'm not invested in the investments. That means I'm owed money. If something happens to this object and it's my loss, that means I owe it. And the important factor here is that I can take profit on investments. If I own something and it generates a profit, that's my profit. But if I'm not exposed to risk, that means I don't own it. If I don't own it, I can't take profit. If any profit on it is going to do this. That's the lesson of Yoshuv. Now, while we're on the subject, one more point about accepting risk, which has been asked before, credit risk. I'm giving a loan to somebody with very bad credit. It's very, very risky. I want to charge you return. Can I do that? And the answer is no. That's risk. What's the difference between credit risk and other risk? Well, when you think back on the Ton Barzel, it maybe becomes a little bit clearer. Because the reason, when it comes to a sheep investment, the reason why the risk allows me to accept profit is because the risk is an indication that I'm an owner of something and I have an investment. But if the risk I have is just a credit risk, if I lend $1 million to a homeless man, it might be a very risky proposition, it might be a bad idea, but I'm not invested in anything. It's just credit risk, and that is a loan. And so that certainly is going to be regular, plain order Riverside Experience. Let's take a quick break here for questions.
Okay, so would be a problem for if I do pay the rent this year because I could have gotten $500 off. So effectively, I'm paying $500 more because I'm paying the regular rate, but it's $500 more than I could have paid.
Oh, that's a good question. Meaning now that there are two prices, shouldn't they both be a problem? You're asking. So the answer to that is that no, because it sometimes is a little hard to tell. But what you have to look at is when is the money actually owed? The price that's offered, the price that you have an option to pay for when the money is actually owed, that's the real price. If playgroup fees are due at the beginning of every month, so whatever they charge at that timing, that's going to be the real price. And if I can pay less earlier, then that paying less earlier is me taking risks. And the flip side would be that if they give me the option to pay next year and pay more, So then that would be Ribbis.
The next part we're going to go to is, I think, for some of the attorneys and the accountants here, is really a very important part. Most people think when Ribbis is involved that the people who are doing the Yisurim is the lender and the borrower. So we're going to find out that that's absolutely not true. The sofer, the person who writes the document, which could be the attorney and the accountant. So I just want to tell you, not the accountant, sorry, the notary. So about a couple of months ago, I called Dovid, who I usually ask all my shilas to, and the first time in 40 years, I asked him the following shilah, and he did not give me such a glot answer, meaning he said to me, ask somebody else. I asked him that if a notary from a title company goes to do a transaction, pick up the documents and do the title report, and in those documents, it's 100% Ribbis Heter, meaning it's probably going to be a loan, either you're going to be 100% guaranteed, there's multiple partners, and let's say it's the W Bank, which is a Jewish bank, and I know they don't have at least they haven't had for a long time, any kind of a heterosis club. So it's Ribbis Heter, 100% also. However, the people themselves, who are the borrowers, don't care. So I asked them, can the notary go and notarize all of those loan documents? So she's going to be notarizing, he's going to be notarizing the mortgage, going to notarize the note, and he's going to notarize all the guarantees. And I also said to him that the deal will not go through, the bank will not lend the money unless that notary, who is probably not even reading the documents, because we all know they just flip the page over and he or she signs it. I said, but it will not occur. So Dovid said to me, he spoke away just a few seconds, would not be cost for those things. I mean, he said it's a tumult on this issue, but he said as long as you should explain it to your client, and then as you hear, there were some reasons why we go to, but it's all issues. And when Dovid told me he didn't have the answer right away, I realized how difficult it's going to be finding people who are able and feel comfortable to answer. When I spoke to Rabbi, I asked him, why do you think Dovid Cohen didn't want to answer it right away because they know each other well? He said because he doesn't necessarily understand what a notary does versus an aid. An aid makes really the contract, the kosher contract, while the notary says only really to take away an argument that they didn't, that's a forgery. He felt that that's the difference between you saying your forgery is not really acting as an aid, and he says that a lot of people who are not attorneys may not understand that distinction between the judiciary law or the Texas executive law.
Okay, so now let's explain that a little bit more. Right in section 4, transgressing prohibition. Once you have a Ribbis loan, moving borrows $5 million, and Shimon from the real estate development project, 7% interest, personal liability, plus the cosigner, who's going to be favored, who's going to transgress this prohibition of Ribbis? So we find potentially the borrower, the lender, the cosigner, the witness, there's a witness to it, the lawyer who writes the documents, potentially the secretary who prints the document out, the notary, and the mortgage broker. These are all potentially over Yisur Iska. How does this list get so long so quickly? But what happened? So there are like 7 different lavin potentially that people can get for Yisur Iska. It's a little bit, we're not going to go into all of them, but there are 4 basic concepts that we should discuss. There's an Isser to lend a Jew money with interest. Actually, several Isser to lend a Jew money with interest. We'll call it one for now. There's an Isser to borrow money with interest. There's a general Isser of lifnei iver l'sitei nefsho, to not put a stumbling block in front of a blind man, literally, which means that you're not allowed to enable someone else to do an Isser. To enable someone else to do an issue, that's an issue for you as well. And the 4th issue is an issue of losis simul. Now the pasuk says in Shor, it says if you lend my nation money, you lend money to a Jew, it makes 2 statements. The first one is, you singular should not act like a creditor. And the next thing the pasuk says is, Lo sesimun alav neshek. You, plural, should not place ribbis upon it. There's a change from the singular to the plural. The singular is talking about the lender. You, the lender, should not act like a creditor. You should have a passive. But then all of a sudden, we're talking about the plural. You, plural, should not place ribbis on something. Which Chazal understood to mean that this issue of placing ribbis on something, lo sesimun, that issue is not only on the lender. It's on anyone who helps to create this ribbis obligation on the borrower. Once there's a loan between a Jew and a Jew, there's a ribbis obligation being placed on them. Anyone who is involved in the creation of that obligation is going to potentially be like this address. So that means the sefer, or the lawyer who prepares the document, the co-signer who adds another dimension of responsibility, the witnesses who help the collection, who perhaps in today's terms can translate into the notaries. The notaries really have two issues, I should point out. One issue is that they might be the modern day version of the witnesses, which you could argue perhaps not, because they're not really witnessing the loan, they're just witnessing the signature, my understanding. The other issue is that they're really giving teeth to the documents. So while they might not be a lawyer, well, they might not be a witness, they might be a lot more similar to a sefer or a lawyer creating the document. They're giving life to the document. That's a big question of what's a simon. Now, of these four Yisurim we discussed, the Isra Bar, the Isra Lens, the Isra Lufnei Iver, and the Isra Los Simon, so some of them have a little more room to get out of than others. The bar when the lender, there's no room to get out of. If once it's a loan that's ribbis, it's usher, it's going to be usher for the borrower and the lender. They got to find some other contract, or something. The issue of the either, that becomes a lot more complicated. We'll discuss a little bit, but it's a big topic, and you must ask a shayla. Lifnei Iver, the Gemara says, has some important limitations. The Gemara says the Lifnei Iver is only when it's trey avridanah, when it's two sides of the river. You're standing on one side of the river, and there's a nazir who can't drink wine on the other side, and he asks you to pass that bottle of wine you're holding. So since he's on the other side of the river, and he can't get the wine without your help, then the Gemara says it's lifnei iver to erase, to enable someone to do an issur. However, the Gemara says that it's chad avridanah, and it's one side of the river. If you, the nazir, and the wine are all sitting together, and the nazir could get the wine by himself, he could get this prohibited object by himself. He doesn't need you. Then there's no issur d'oraisa to help him get it. You're just passing it to him. You're not really doing that much. That is the issur d'oraisa. However, there is still an issur d'rabbanan of misayeh yedei, of aiding and abetting the act of the issur. That still applies even when it's chad avridanah, even when it's all on one side of the river. Even if you're not enabling. That has other atayr which are beyond the scope of tonight's discussion, but this is an issue which must be spoken and discussed with the place. Now, it is important to note that the issue of los simon, that issue of placing a ribbis obligation on someone, which applies potentially to a lawyer and a notary and a secretary, those isurim, you do not have the heter of chad avridanah. Even if somebody would lend money without a contract, without any contract at all, it's still an issur d'oraisa to create that contract. There might be other atayr, perhaps. But that's not what needs to be discussed. This is a very complex issue. I think this is enough of that issue for tonight. I'm going to stop now quickly for any questions on this issue. Heter Iska.
So what you're saying is that if you sell someone a property that is required to get a mortgage, you cannot do that?
If you sell someone a property that's required to get a mortgage,
They can't afford to pay for it 100% in cash.
well, they can get a mortgage without the extra Ribbis. They can borrow from a non-Jewish bank.
But if they borrow from a Jewish bank, then they would have to get into risk.
Right. Selling something to somebody which they might use for an ISR, that is something very different. Right? If you're brokering a loan between two Jews, and you're bringing them together in order for them to come together and do an ISR D'Oraisa, that's a big problem. If you sell someone food and he's not going to make a bracha on it, so it happens to be that is a shayla, but that's a very different shayla.
If you broker a loan, how can you, and you don't know the lender, you don't know the bank necessarily well, how can you tell if a Jew is getting interest on it?
That's a good question. You have to speak to a social.
Just to expand on that question for 1 minute. There is a concept of roy, that's what the Rabbi was talking about, that when a person, when you don't know who the lender is, this comes up, it's a website called Prosper, there's other websites out there that is a borrower and a lender, and people don't know who's on the other side of the loan, because it's just done through the web. You don't know who you're borrowing from. You'll never know who you're borrowing from. It's a good question if you're allowed to do that. You don't know any bank that the board members of the bank could be Jewish. We have no idea if they're Jewish. So a person should try to ascertain if the principals of the bank or the board members are Jewish. But in the case of it's not possible and not feasible, because even if the name is Goldberg, that just means that your father's name was Goldberg, and the father might be Jewish, but the mother could have been non-Jewish. There's many times no way of finding this out, and you're allowed to rely on the fact that most people in the United States are Jewish. That's good. I mean, obviously, a person should ask a shayla on an individual basis, but many times you can rely on the fact that it's a non-Jew.
What do you ask the patient does for the law?
That's a good question. It's a question if lending online, borrowing online is kabul kemechza mechza, or it's called parsh move parsh. It's something that's talked about. It's a very interesting question. There's different shittas about it. There's one of these loan societies that many people have issues with. Yeah, but there's like this non-profit loan society that could have issues, but it's a question that needs to be known.
Now we're going to move to section 5, the Ribbis Heter Iska. Then we're talking about Heter Iska. Heter Iska is very important really to know what it is, how it works. And Moshe writes in one place that if you don't know how it works, like Novak mentioned, you think that it's just some kind of amulet that magically makes mutter to lend money or Ribbis, that it doesn't work. And you have to actually have intent to structure the loan as it's described in Heter Iska. So there are a lot of issues about Heter Iska. It's very important to know how it works. It's important to be in contact with a basic to help guide you about how to use it, when to use it, and which one to use. But I do think that understanding well the basics of it helps lead you to understand and pick up on the issues understand which ones and when you can use it. So we'll start off with the basics of Heter Iska, and we'll hopefully move on to some of its permutations. Now, to understand Heter Iska, we have to first understand what an Iska is. Heter Iska is not mentioned in the Gemara or in Shulchan Aruch. It was originally written by Menzel of Krakow about 40 years ago, sometimes known as the Maharam. But that's not the Maharam in the back of the Gemara, by the way. It's a different Maharam. And the Iska. The Gemara discusses the concept of Iska. Now, to understand this, I will go back a step. We're going to start off with the very basic base, and we're going to slowly add layers of complexity. Reuben's sitting at his desk, and into his office walks Shimon, a friend of his from the next office over. And Shimon says, I have a great deal. I just got a phone call. You know, I like expensive pens, and I have a contact in Mont Blanc, the store going out of business, and I can buy a whole store's worth of pens, pennies on the dollar, $100,000. I know I'm connected with dealers. I can turn it over in days, and and double the money. Do you want to go in 50-50 with me? And Reuben says, sure, and he writes a check for $50,000, and he gives it to Shimon. Shimon takes Reuben's $50,000. He takes his own $50,000, and he buys the pens, $100,000. Now, at that point, they become partners. They each own a 50% stake in every single one of those pens. And everyone that gets sold, they split the profits, the revenue. Anyone that gets broken or lost, they split the loss. If the deal goes as planned, and they make $200,000, each one walks away with $100,000. And if Shimon gets robbed at gunpoint and the box of pens is stolen, they're both out their capital, they're both out their $50,000. That's a partnership. Now, let's change it a little bit. Shimon walks into Reuben's office. Shimon has this great deal on full of things and pens. Shimon says, I don't have any capital, I don't have any cash. Reuben, would you like to lay out $100,000? And I'll go buy the pens, we'll make money. And Reuben says, sure. And he writes a check for $100,000 and he gives it to Shimon. Shimon goes to the store and Shimon buys those pens. Now what happens? What's the equity relationship now between Reuben and Shimon and the pens? So the Gemara says in Mattisyahu that Stam Iska, and Iska, which by the way means a business deal, a Stam Iska, one that's not spoken out, that you don't speak out the details, is Chatzi Mil Chatzi Mikotim, which means it's half loan and half investments. Which means that the $100,000 that Reuben gave to Shimon, 50,000 of that money is Reuben invested in pens. And 50,000 is Reuben giving Shimon a free loan. Shimon, here's a free loan so that you can buy your equity in these pens. At this point, they each have $50,000 equity in these pens. And the cash flows are going to work very similar to the first case. They're going to split the profits, they're going to split the loss. The only difference is that besides being equity partners, there's a $50,000 loan on the table that Shimon borrowed from Reuben. So if Shimon gets robbed at gunpoint, the pens are stolen, then Shimon, they both lost their $50,000 in equity. Shimon still has to pay Reuben the $50,000 that he borrowed. That's an issue. Now there is one issue with an Iska, Gemara points out, that once Reuben is lending Shimon $50,000, at that point it becomes a malva loyla relationship. Reuben is a lender, and Shimon is a borrower. And as we mentioned before, whenever you have a borrower and a lender, you can't have any benefit going from the borrower to the lender. The borrower can be benefiting the lender in any way associated with the loan. But here in this situation, there's a very big benefit coming from the borrower to the lender. That's bad. Shimon. But he worked out the deal, and on an ongoing basis, he's working on a deal. He's going to the stores, picking them up. He's negotiating with the dealers. He's managing Reuben's money for him. It's pretty good to find someone to manage your money for free, especially those kind of returns. Now, in the first case, when they're partners, this is not a problem. Because if one partner chooses to manage his partner's money for free, so he's a nice guy, that's fine. But when it comes to Ribbis, a borrower can't be a nice guy to the lender. That's Ribbis. Now, that's Ribbis Drabbanan. And since it's Ribbis Drabbanan, the Gemara says there are certain heter, there are certain leniencies with this issue. The Gemara says that the borrower, the lender, Reuven, does not need to pay Shimon the full market price for Shimon's work. He can get away with much less. And in particular, if they agree on certain, if they make an agree about how much they're going to pay beforehand, they can get away with much, much less. The special leniency in Novak's Ribbis Drabbanan. There are two issues, two choices they have, which we should discuss here. The first one is, if they agree on a set dollar amount, it can be anything. Shimon can agree to take any dollar amount for his fee. He can agree to take $1. You'll pay me $1 and I'll manage your money in the system. And that's fine. Another option they have is Shimon can take more of the profits, or he can be exposed to less of the losses. They can either split the profits 50-50 and Shimon only has 49% of the loss, or they can split the losses 50-50 and Shimon gets an extra point of profits. As long as they agree on it beforehand, these are payments which can be done to remove this issue of Ribbis Drabbanan. However, it is an issue, and it's important for Reuben to realize that Reuben must pay that dollar. Once there's a loan here and Shimon does work for Reuben must pay Shimon for that work. He must pay that dollar. If he doesn't pay that dollar, then he just transgressed the issue of Ribbis Drabbanan, getting free work from the person who owes you money. Now, that's an issue. However, many times, people don't want investments. People want their money to act more like debt. They want their capital to stay safe. And they want to have steady, reliable returns. So that's where that interest comes in. How does that work? So, basically there are 2 points here. The first one is, let's go back to Reuben and Shimon. Reuben wants to guarantee his capital. Like any debt, your capital is more or less guaranteed, subject to credit risk. Reuben wants to guarantee his capital. But he's invested half his capital in hens, which might get lost or stolen or devalued. So Reuben says to Shimon, he says like this, he says, Shimon, we're 50-50 partners, and any loss that happens in these hens, half of that loss is mine. However, I'm stipulating that I don't have to believe you if you tell me you lost money. If you come here and you tell me that those pens got stolen, or you had to sell them at a loss, I'm not going to believe you unless you bring me 2 kosher witnesses, 2 Edom Shavim, that loss took place. If you come here with 2 witnesses that those pens were stolen and a check for $50,000, I'll accept that. Otherwise, you pay me $100,000. Shimon says, okay. With one stipulation, Reuben has virtually guaranteed his capital. He hasn't absolutely guaranteed his capital. His witnesses could show up. But he's gotten pretty close. And that's as close as you can get without getting into the issue of Ribbis. His capital is going to be guaranteed. Now that's capital. Reuben has just guaranteed his capital. Now comes the interest. Reuben is not interested in pen speculation. Reuben wants a 10% return on his money. So Reuben says like this. Reuben says to Shimon, I think it's a very, very safe estimate that those $100,000 worth of pens we can sell for at least $120,000. Safe estimate. Now, if you sell those pens for $120,000, that means we're going to split the profits. And you're going to give me back my $100,000 capital, plus another $10,000. $10,000. Shimon, If you come into my office with a check for $110,000, that's all I want. You can keep all the rest of the profit. And that's fine. I'll give you all the rest. But Shimon, if you're going to come back here and you're going to tell me you couldn't turn a profit with those pennies, I don't have to believe you. I'm stipulating here that I'm not going to believe you on any claims of profits unless you make a solemn oath in Beis. Make a solemn oath in Beis. You didn't make money. I'll accept $100,000. You bring Edom that you lost the money. I'll accept $50,000. Or you can come back to my office with a check for $110,000. That's a Heter Iska. That's the, I think we're calling it standard Heter Iska for business use. In the back of things. I'm giving you money, half is a loan, half is an investment. The only profit I have a right to take is based on my investment. However, if you give me back anything less than the rate of return I'm looking for, you have to start making shulas, you have to start bringing Edom, and I'll pay you $1 for your work, which I can't forget.
We're at 7:50. Why don't you jump? Is that about doors? Are you leaving? Oh.
No, so that's a standard Iska for personal use. Now, let's take these to one side. Let's just talk about one permutation of Heter Iska. So there are several, but just to get out there. Shimon comes into Reuven's office, and Shimon says, I need to borrow $100,000 to make a chassid. Reuven says, look, you have plenty of capital. Shimon says, it's not liquid. I don't want to liquidate it. I want to borrow $100,000. Reuven says, fine, you know what? I'll lend you $100,000, 10% interest. That's what I'm looking to make a loan. And Shimon says, fine, we have this Heter Iska handy, we'll pull it out. That's a problem. Why is that a problem? There's no Iska. There's no investment. Reuven knows perfectly well that this money is not being invested in anything. So Reuven can't show up in a month and start demanding a shvua that his money can make money if he knows perfectly well going in that his money is not going to make money. So the standard Heter Iska for business use cannot be used here. That's why we have a standard Heter Iska for personal use. And what that says is that those $100,000 is not coming in to be used for future investments. That $100,000 is, the intent is that that's meant to buy in to Shimon's existing investments. Let's say, for example, that Shimon has 5 different deals going on. He's got $100,000 of equity in each. That means he's got a portfolio of $500,000. When Reuven gives Shimon $100,000, he's buying a prorated share in all of those 5 investments. And that is Reuven's Iska. And that's fine. That's an Iska. You have to know which one to use. Sometimes you can only use one. So that's what
All those Iskas, to keep the syllabus, there are appendixes A through E, and it's also titled with it. For instance, E is the one about the personal use for us. So a lot of people have just one Heter Iska on the computer, and they just roll that one off all the time. So that's really not right, and we can really get to all of them about that there are 4 or 5 Heter Iskas on the back. Also, I published a book years ago with Rabbi Rising's book on laws of Ribbis. If you are involved in it, it's not necessarily going to tell you the answers that you can. Well, it'll tell you a lot of the answers. It's a hard book to understand. There's sort of issue spot. Many of these Heter Iskas are in the back, but I know that a lot of people just use one general Heter Iska all the time for every deal. That's really not right. That there are different kinds of Heter Iskas, and maybe Rabbi Grossman will get to the topic of what happens if you did a deal with the wrong kind of Heter Iska. So now I do a turn over to Rabbi Grossman. Let's ask some questions.
What about an own real estate property? Which category of Heter Iska does that fall under?
So Right. It depends. There are a number of issues. It is specific property. Certainly, a property can be in Iska. However, you have to make sure the profit's coming in. It's very important to note that if you know what the Iska is, if you know the investment you're buying into, and you know it didn't do well, that can create problems. If you know the investment that's going on, if you know what you're buying into, sometimes it's better to use a kula b'kosset iska, to use this kula b'kosset iska, the personal use we described. Because if I know the property you're investing in, and I know it's not doing well, I can't demand the shvua from you. I can't demand profit from you because I know there is no profit. So, however, if I don't know the details, if there might be a profit, then theoretically at least, real estate certainly is an investment, and there's no reason why I couldn't buy into it. But there are details, so it's always important to ask Yeshiva.
You mentioned that Shimon gets robbed at gunpoint. He's liable for $100,000.
Why? Wasn't his fault.
What was the question? Can you just say again?
So if Shimon gets robbed at gunpoint, according to the Heter Iska, he's still liable for the $100,000. But it wasn't his fault that he lost $100,000.
You're speaking in the Heter Iska case?
I think before, the Mattisyahu case.
Right. So, well, like this, I mean, the issues of a shamer and the responsibility of the guardsmen are a little bit complicated. If they each have an equity stake in it, so oftentimes the shamer wouldn't have to pay for a moving tax. In the case of the Heter Iska, technically, Shimon might not be responsible for moving tax. He doesn't have to believe Shimon about what happens. If Shimon comes in and says they were stolen, moving is not obligated to believe them. Maybe you stole, you turned the property, you want to pocket it all. I don't have to believe you. So without aiding that it got stolen, there he's going to have to pay the whole $100,000 as per the terms of the Heter Iska.
How would you define a syndication deal? A real estate syndication deal? Right? We're looking at it, right? How would you define it? Is it a loan, or am I telling you I need $1 million of equity, I'll give you 80% of ownership for $1 million? So am I selling you the same property at a higher price from which I purchased it, or is it some type of loan?
Well, it's always going to depend on the details of the deal, but if people are investing if people are investing in a syndication, it is an investment. I think usually they're subject to risk, and if the syndicator is taking an extra share of the profits, so that's a syndication fee.
And if you're guaranteeing them a pref on the money they put down?
We're going to get that next.
Okay.
The guarantees generally are an issue. And that's what we're talking about now. Next on the guarantees, when the guarantees over the Deutsche Bank, like they have guarantees, some people guaranteed, there's a deal with Chase Manhattan. 3 people are guaranteed, the other 10 are not guaranteed. That could be potentially a problem if there's cross indemnifications amongst all the members. That could also be an issue. That's what we're dealing with now. That only time you have a personal guarantees, even if the original lender is a non-Jewish bank, you have Jewish partners, it can't open up to Heter Iska issues. Ribbis issues that need to be resolved. There are different ways to get around it, but that's what we're talking about next. That, I think, for most of us, it's a very common situation where we have multiple partnerships, we have partners, multiple members, and you have guarantees. Not every time does the bank want everybody to guarantee, and sometimes they're guarantees. 100% guarantees, sometimes they're proportionate guarantees, sometimes they're basketball clause guarantees, so they all have issues with them.
All right, I have a question on the personal Heter Iska. You said that it needs to be spread across other investments that the borrower has. So the assumption is, let's say, 10 investments, $10,000 each or whatever it was. If there's a loss on one of the investments, let's say one property goes into foreclosure or whatever it is, the assumption there is that 1/10 of the investment or whatever, $10,000 less is due to the lender?
Right, exactly. Right, right.
That's the other personal Heter Iska now.
Right, with the personal Heter Iska, buying a prorated share in all of the investments or all the known investments. Now, even if there is a loss, it has to be proven in order for the investors to have to suffer the loss.
I have actually a question on the previous topic about the heteros go to the banks and borrow. If a borrower borrows money, I guess, from, let's say the bank we know is not Jewish, so no heteros get needed, but then the loan is bought for whatever reason by individuals that are Jewish, knowing that the borrower is Jewish, who's then in violation? Because the borrower now owes money plus interest to Jews, but they originally took the money out from...
Right, yes, that's a very good question. I believe that Dr. Grossman is going to be speaking about that.
Second, yeah. That's all.
Thank you very much. Beautiful, very comprehensive, and extremely clear presentation of a very complex matter of halacha. Just try to comment on a few things and then move on to a few other topics. Time is short and the topics are quite extensive. And we just to recap a little, we're mentioning that by personal heter iska, it gets spread out amongst all of a person's investments. In other words, you're not buying into a specific business deal. You're giving the person the money, and you're really like buying a share in his investment. So just a few things to note. One is that a person that doesn't have assets, a person who really doesn't own a business or a home, where there is a question, a person should ask a shiloh. If, a lot of times people borrowing money, especially high rates, or people who don't have almost anything, or rushing call, and that could be a shiloh for that. It could be because there's nothing to buy into really. He doesn't have a home or a few properties, or the person doesn't have anything. It could be a question. There are a tailoring, but it should be you should consult lots of authority. It was mentioned also that if you know which investment in a business transaction, you know exactly the investment that you're investing in, that could be a problem. It could cause the heter iska to do what's called a haram, because you're demanding an oath on an investment that you know went sour. So you don't really, how can you ask him to swear? You know which investment it was, you know that went sour. So that also is something that sometimes when the people, a father's lending to a son, or relatives are lending, and people, partners are lending to each other, the situation is such that the lender knows exactly what it's doing with the business, and that could also raise questions with regards to effectively executing a heter iska. And also...
It triggers the entire payment though.
No, it may trigger the entire payment, but his personal liability is usually it's probably trigger the entire payment, because the default, that's a trigger, the bad boy actions. So, but his liability is going to be limited to the amount of money that he failed to pass on or use according to the contract. I don't think it's going to be reversed with things different, but that's not really guaranteeing the loan. You're guaranteeing the loan was something wrong, but it's not costing the loan. It's what you did wrong, you're paying for what you did wrong.
But the way sometimes it's drafted so that it triggers the entire, you're responsible for paying the entire loan if you were a bad boy, not just the loss you caused, but the entire loan amount.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean, you're saying that he's going to have to say everything?
The question being asked is, if according to Moshe that it says that if there's no personal guarantee, then it's okay because you're lending to a corporation and there's no borrower. So does a bad boy clause make it as if there is considered personal guarantee? And the answer is that even if it calls it the entire loan, that's just like a punishment or whatever that you're getting. It's like an insurance policy, but it doesn't make you the borrower necessarily. It's the corporation borrowed, and you're on the hook to pay back the loan as a punishment or whatever it is. If you misrepresent it, but that doesn't necessarily make it that you're on the hook.
Yes, sir. So you were mentioning that any time someone co-signs on a loan, it could potentially be an issue. If someone's buying a house and their parents are co-signing for them, and this happens all the time, right? If their income is not whatever the case is. So there is a potential that in that case they could have to have some sort of risk of payment.
Yeah, so it's not only a potential in that case, it is necessary for when a parent co-signs a loan because they have creditworthiness, and even though the son is going to make payments directly to the bank and they have an internal agreement that really he's going to pay the bank and he's on the hook for the loan, but since legally the parent is on the hook for the loan and let's not go, well, there's two cases, it could be either a guarantor or that's a lot of times people take out loans for other people. They take an equity line on their home for their son and they give it, and they lend it to their son and the son agrees to pay the interest straight to the bank because he doesn't want to, he's not asking for, he'll pay the interest himself, but he doesn't have the funds. So that would be, there is a need for Heter Iska because even though the son is technically borrowing it, but legally the parent is on the hook. The financial institution doesn't recognize the son, so it's really like two loans. If you look at the syllabus in chapter 7,
yes,
co-signing on a non-Ribbis loan seems double when one loan is really two, which means that in halacha it's viewed as if the father is borrowing with interest to the bank, which is not a problem, but then he's relending it to the son with interest, which is a problem because that's Jew and Jew. And there is a Heter Iska needed, and the same thing would be if they're guaranteeing the loan, because since if the parent is asked to pay the interest payments, because let's say the son defaults or he doesn't pay, so the bank will go to the guarantor and say you owe me money, then the parent can turn around and ask the son to reimburse him for those interest payments. So that's considered a Ribbis transaction, unless the parent makes a deal with the son that in the event that I'm going to have to pay on your behalf, you won't have to pay me back the interest. You'll just pay me back the principal that I paid, but I'll cover the interest. So there, a Heter Iska would not be necessary because there's no Ribbis relationship between the father and the son. But if that's why husband and wife many times, and most of the time, if they're borrowing, the husband borrows from the wife, they're borrowing a home together. You may not need a Heter Iska. Charlotte should be asked, but since there's an understanding that even if I'm going to pay your interest, you're going to pay my interest, so in that case, many times you would need a Heter Iska, but the question needs to be asked. Yes.
There's a new type of deal I've never been involved. I've heard about it. It's saying it's called shmuck insurance, where you sell a business for X dollars.
No, that's a little different than that. You sell a business on whatever, January 1st for, let's say, $1 million. The buyer turns 3 months later and sells it for $2 million. The original seller wants to recoup some of the extra profit that the buyer got from flipping this business. Is that a Ribbis problem?
I think I understand what the logistics of it, but if you're buying a business and selling it for more,
well, that's fine, but the original seller recoups some of the profits that his purchase.
Is there any loan involved? I don't think there's any loan involved there. I think it's just buying and selling.
Additional consideration. Okay.
First, it's quarter till 8, so we really don't have to go to 8. That's where you need to stop at 8. So one of the reasons I really wanted Grossman to be here, I wanted to give a chance to tell everybody about. One reason I wanted Rabbi Grossman here is so I wanted everybody to have a chance to understand what the Beis Havaad does and how I think it can be helpful to you. I have used it. I think that everybody should certainly pick up a card, pick up some information. I'd like them to just turn to that. There's a lot of topics that we haven't gotten to, but we just can't do it because of limited time. I'd like them to take some time now, just see what they do there. It's an excellent, excellent source to go to because there's really not that many people in New York, New Jersey area that can deal with this and understand what a bad boy clause is and all kinds of things.
Many times we get these calls at the closing table is something that's, time is of the essence, and, so it is very difficult to find, usually a rabbi that will be able to, get into the nitty-gritty of the transaction and put together the necessary documents when time is of the essence, and turn it around in a time where many attorneys get frustrated and it could hold up a lot of times, very significant closings and significant deals, and we have a team of posting of dayanim that are attend to these, that are available throughout the business day, and we really do try to turn around, in a very quick manner and try to get things done. There are, like I mentioned earlier, there's and something also important when it comes to Heter Iska is which I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, was that in the Heter Iska, many times the Heter Iska that's, the Heter Iska has to really override the loan documents, and many times lawyers that need to get comfortable with the Heter Iska. Just last week we had a huge deal that some of the partners wanted to be signed with 100 Rosh because their attorneys didn't let them, were not comfortable with the typical Heter Iska. His question was, is he allowed to be signed with 100 Rosh also? If he doesn't have a say in the matter, it was a very complicated thing. But the good news is that recently we were a little bit involved in getting Quicken Loans to sign a Heter Iska. I was on the phone with a road with a few Rabbanim here in Erzro and Mendel Shafran, going through the nitty-gritty of the Heter Iska, because Quicken Loans, is like was mentioned earlier, they sell the loans right away. So the question of if they're going to write a Heter Iska, it opens them up to an exposure that they'll have a very difficult time selling the loan that's attached to Heter Iska they don't really understand. So it got very complicated. So we had to draft a very unique Heter Iska that really the Heter Iska was only until the sale, and then it turned into a regular loan. And it took a while to get the legal teams for Quicken Loans comfortable, but the good news is that the legal team of Quicken Loans was able to get their arms around the Heter Iska. Really, anybody can. So it's just sometimes takes work. It should be with enough foresight. These things should be taken care of before closing, but many times it has to be done, very quickly and efficiently. And our Rabbanim are really dedicated. That's really what they do. It's not like they're focused on. This is a lot focused on getting things done. And dealing with the legal community and the business community, and Rosh, we have a lot of tzlach, and it's a resource that's worth knowing about and taking advantage of.
So the last part of it for the attorneys, and that is how well has Heter Iska's fared in court. So when I look at it, there's basically two kinds of Heter Iskas in litigation. There's either using a Heter Iska as a shield or using it as a sword. So the shield is the most typical way that Heter Iskas are used. That's when the loan is in default, they go to court, the lender goes to the court and makes a motion for summary judgment based on the documentation. So that's a typical time when the borrower will use the Heter Iska and try to put before the court that really this is a partnership transaction. There's other things that have to be done in the transaction, and they ask the court then to deny the motion for summary judgment. That's probably the vast majority of the cases. Basically, that argument or the shield has not fared well in court, primarily because either the Heter Iskas that have percolated their way through the courts were either the kind when there was a loan document, the regular standard kind of note, and someone wrote on the bottom of his name, top of his name, I'll be Heter Iska. That certainly was not a winning combination in the courts. The other time there would be a one-page Heter Iska that most attorneys use. The courts have generally viewed the Heter Iska either in a very practical kind of way. They said that, listen, it looks like some hooji-dooby from 400 years ago. We're not going to look at it at all. Other courts have kind of looked at it and said that there's really not a dispute between the Heter Iska because really the borrower is promising to pay back money at a certain rate. The courts would generally like to use documents that do not knock out other kind of documents. So it has really not done very well. Okay, the other time is the sword point. There's only 1 or 2 reported cases. And that was when there was a transaction, a loan transaction, and there was absolutely no personal guarantee whatsoever. So after the borrower defaulted, so the lender got a judgment against the corporation, but he started an action wanting to use that. The Heter Iska was really a partnership agreement, and therefore he wanted to sue the borrower as a partner, and then that's what I call using it as a sword to try to get to a personal guarantee. When the court threw it out anyway, they said that there was a personal guarantee which he actually scratched out his name on. There was a long personal guarantee, so he only signed where the corporation was, so the court threw that out. The other reason the court threw it out was again because they thought that the Heter Iska, just because it's a very pithy 1-page document, it really didn't deserve, I think, the same level of kind of respect. But I do want to tell you about one great case. This is an unreported federal case out of California. It's called Colby versus Newman. So this is really being hung up by your own petard. This is a case where Mr. Newman, who's a firm guy, decides to buy a plastic company that has to be open 7 days a week. And apparently the reason it needs to be open 7 days a week is the machinery always has to be running, has to be hot, and if it's not hot, then it just won't work. You can't have it closed down for 24 hours. These are all kinds of, these are the Shabbos stars. So he entered into a Shabbos star. So this Kitzur Shabbos star is you have a non-Jewish partner or something like that, and he then will get all the profits for Shabbos, and then the Jewish partner will get all the profits for all the rest of the week, and that's how they do it. Okay, there are people who use those kind of documents. What happened in this case was the non-Jewish partner was actually a seller. So the seller sold his business to the Jewish guy. The Jewish guy then paid him back everything, but the partner really wanted more money. So what the non-Jewish partner did was he had to pay something because there was a clawback. So he paid something on the clawback, but he said, I'm a partner. And because I'm a partner in this deal, I can't be bought out so easily. So the court at that time, I didn't see what the Star Shabbos looked like, but the way the federal judge described it was, it's a long, detailed partnership agreement. And it looked just like the kind of partnership agreements that I see every day in court. And it has this long section on that the non-Jewish partner is indeed a partner. And I understand that the Jewish thing is for Shabbos, it's a religion, and then she laid into the Jewish guy and said, if it's real, then why you argue? And if it's a fake, why you do your fake religion? So it's a 31-page decision. But the court did not grant the Jewish guy summary judgment and held that they had to keep the partner in there and be paid off. What the judge said was, in referring to 3 or 4 cases out of the second department here in New York, said all those Heter Iskas were very short and they didn't look like they really should override a document. But if I see a Heter Iska, I see the Star Shabbos. Now I've seen Star Shabbos that people use and they're only 1 or 2 pages or something, 1 page long. Okay, but this one apparently wasn't like that. It looked like a real partnership agreement, and the judge said it is a partnership agreement, and he is a partner, and he has to be bought out. Generally, if you're going to go into court with Heter Iskas or something like that as a defense, it's not going to work very well, and using this sword is only 1 reporting case. So I want to thank everybody for coming. If you do want to get more information about doing Ribbis, Shor Yoshuv will come to you, or Rabbi Grossman in the back. Thank you very much.